Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the CFL free agent period and just giving some quick thoughts about each team for me. So anyway, before we get on into that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the CFL, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So yes, I'm back after a very long absence. I do apologize, and what I'm going to do here is just record multiple videos for the channel today and then schedule them out for the end of the week. So hopefully we're going to have at least 3 videos this week, and ideally in a perfect world 2 more on top of that. So with it being said, we're going to kick off the CFL free agency talk and start, of course, with the BC Lions. So BC, coming off of a 12-6 season, saw guys like Matthew Betts go to the NFL and join another set of Lions, the Detroit Lions. Very unfortunate there, as it is 18 sacks gone, and just a guy that's been able to put a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And instead, the Lions are left getting some other interesting pieces. Pete Robertson is an interesting piece that I would like to talk about a little bit. He's had some good seasons in recent years. I do know that he did have that late hit. It was either this season or last season against Coloros. So there's a lot of talk about whether or not he's going to be able to, put that aside and then focus on this season, of course, with a new team. I think for what we are getting, maybe this could be a good addition to the defensive line that could help them out, especially in pass rush. Tough to say at the moment, too, because, again, what would Betts' season look like after he just had 18 sacks this year? Would he have dropped off to, 9 this year or something like that? Always tough to say, and it's more than just one single statistical category, but it is something where you're hoping Pete can at least alleviate some of that pressure for the pass rush, and I'm hoping that maybe he could get a double-digit sack season. He's been close before, but I don't think he's hit it just yet. As for some other signings too, of course, you have Deontay Evans, which is going to be part of our secondary, former All-Star, and is joining a side that was pretty good at times this year, but at the same time too, looking at what we saw with BC, there was definitely a game where the secondary was beatable, and you're hoping that that will change this year, where against some of the better teams, they don't really get exposed like they were. And on top of that too, they signed Dakota Prukop and Jake Dolegala at quarterback. It's going to be very interesting to see how the whole quarterback situation works this year, assuming that Vernon Adams Jr. is healthy, which I'm hoping he will be. He signed through 2026. He is the guy for the foreseeable future for the next 3 seasons. However, at the same time, too, Dane Evans was the backup quarterback last year. He has since retired, unfortunately, and I think that does leave a hole a little bit at the QB spot. With Evans, you had an experienced quarterback that had been a starter in the Grey Cup and was somebody that I felt like maybe wasn't going to go up there and give you monster games, but if Vern was out with an injury or you're going to rest him towards the end of the year, you knew that there was a chance that he could get you some wins. Prukop is more of the running type quarterback, and Dolegala didn't have a lot of high moments, I think, with Saskatchewan, so little worried about what happens if Vern gets injured this year, but again, hoping for the best. And for BC, not a crazy big free agency period, but something where hopefully the defense looks good and then the backup QB spot is settled. As for the Calgary Stampeders, this is where things are a little interesting. They lost some pieces, they gained some pieces. A lot of teams do that, I know. But in terms of additions, they got a guy like Demario Houston, and Houston is an individual that led the CFL in interceptions last season, I believe with 7, may have been 8. It's tough to say because, again, you know that looking at simple stats, it's very difficult to pinpoint how things are going to work. But if you are able to get a lot of interceptions like Houston's been able to do, and I have seen some games where things have gone well for him, that's going to be good. And for this defense, they would like to be able to create more turnovers and be able to help out this offense. We'll see if that is going to be a good signing for them, if he's going to be capable of being a big-time playmaker defensively. And then on top of that, too, they brought in Matthew Schultz. I'm not totally opposed to this signing because Schultz was a quarterback that's kind of bounced around Montreal and Hamilton, not been the true starter for a team for a long stretch of time. However, at the same time, too, looking at Schultz, he is not a bad backup to have, and a guy that you would say if a quarterback is injured or you're looking to make a change in a game where things aren't working, may not always be the worst case. And I think it is a situation where Jake Mayer knows he has to have a big year. He's talked about that recently in some interviews and things like that, but at the same time too, bringing in Schultz is proof to say, hey, we believe in you, but at the same time too, we have somebody that is here as a backup that is going to compete with you. If you're, struggling, this is somebody that could take your job, so we just need to make sure you're locked in. As for Schultz, it is a situation where I definitely think he'll get to see reps. I cannot remember who the quarterback was for them last year. I want to say like Tommy Stevens was more of their rushing QB. But with Schultz, I'm hoping he gets to get a couple games in, whether that is again with Mayer hopefully not being injured, but if he is getting some reps, or if Calgary's in a good spot where they're able to, rest Mayer towards the end of the year. That would be something to watch out for, and I think that is going to be fun to see the QB competition between those two, but Mayer is probably going to be the guy. As for some final talking points with Calgary, they did lose Kadeem Carey, but we're going to talk about that more with the Argos. As for the Edmonton Elks, CFL is only showing that they made one signing this season, which doesn't really seem to be accurate, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just not tracking some other things, but I do know that with this signing, they got Javon Leake, and of course they get another guy in Boris Beatty, so I'm not sure why that wasn't a deal on here, but either way, I think this is going to be big. We'll talk about it more in our season preview for Edmonton, where I think their special teams could improve. Whether or not that is significantly or just a little bit, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Javon Leake, one most outstanding special teams player this year, and is somebody that could be a game changer for them. Obviously was setting records last season for the Argos, and is hopefully going to give them a little bit more punch on the return. So I don't remember if it was punt returns or kick returns last year, but one of them they were either last or near dead last for the category of return yards. I think it was on punt returns they were 8th in the league. So Leake, maybe getting some touchdowns for them or just putting them in better field position is always great. And I think a big thing here too is them getting Boris Beatty. I don't know what his contract is, probably substantial considering he is an all-star. But Dean Faithful last year, we saw him have some moments where he really struggled. With Beatty, you're probably going to get a relatively accurate kicker that can kick from far out. So that is going to be good for them. Also, too, another thing, this wasn't a signing, but it was a trade. Jake Serezna, Curly Gittens Jr., hoping that Gittens Jr. can kind of get things back on the right direction. We talked about how last year he had a little bit of a down year, but with him being reacquainted with McLeod Bethel-Thompson or just getting time with Trey Ford, I'm hoping that he can kind of have a bounce back year, because if Serezna has a good time in Toronto, a lot of people are going to be saying, well, wish things would have worked out differently for this trade. But again, with Curly Gittens Jr., he has the experience with McLeod, and McLeod I think will have a good chance to at least compete for the starting job. Maybe be handed it right away. I really couldn't tell you at the moment. Chris Jones knows that. I don't. But for the Elks, I think more of the special teams focus, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, is I'm excited to see what they're going to look like next year and what their expectations versus what the reality will be by the end of 2024. As for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, kind of an interesting group here as they end up bringing in some extra pieces that are very interesting. They poached a lot of talent away from Toronto. I don't know if you want to say poached, or they were just able to go out there and just know that Toronto wasn't going to be able to match them. Maybe for some of these signings, Jamal Peters is a guy that's really feasted on them in the past few years, and he has 10 interceptions over his past 2 seasons. Maybe they're hoping again, kind of like the Demario Houston situation, the guy that is a big playmaker on defense that can help them out. On top of that, too, they get another guy, Dwayne Hendricks, on the defensive line that should help them out, or just be a part of this group. That is all fun there, but I think one of the more interesting pieces was the fact that they signed Tim White to an extension. White was a free agent looking for about $300,000 a year as a receiver. That's a lot of money. And they ended up signing him for like $200,000 to $225,000 there too. That is something that could end up being a good deal for them. Again, money is tight with the CFL salary, but White being there, being a guy that's gone for about 1,200 yards each season, I think, off the top of my head, and I think he had 8 touchdowns in the past 2 seasons apiece, so 16 total. A guy that could be a primary receiver for them, and to get him for like $75,000 to $100,000 less is not a bad deal. As for some other things with the Tiger Cats, Scott Milanovich is going to be the head coach, obviously, as Orlando Steinhauer takes on a new role. I don't think it's a problem. Yes, they're losing Matthew Schultz, but he is going to be in a situation, Coach M, by the way, and that's who I'm talking about, where you get to see Taylor Powell, who I believe is still in a contract with the team from what I was able to find online. He's going to probably be the backup, and then you have Bo that is going to be the starter. Bo dealing with injuries. This team has underperformed in recent years. This is where you kind of get to see where Bo's career is going to go up to this point, and whether or not Taylor will take over as this QB1, if you will. I think with Milanovic, you are seeing a situation where he took over for Tommy Condell as the offensive coordinator a little bit later in the year, and off the top of my head, I think things went better with him and they were able to score more points. So I'm hoping that one of these two quarterbacks work out for them. Again, they were able to re-sign guys like Terry Godwin, they were able to re-sign guys like Tim White, like I said, and get some of the talent away from Toronto. So, taking away a little bit of talent from a team that went 16-2 as you look to get back to being better and hopefully hosting a playoff game. Going to be interesting to see how Hamilton does this year. I'm not going to get really too deep into how I think this team will go. We'll save that for season previews, but I think this is an offseason that could define what direction they'll head. As for the Montreal Alouettes, we won't focus on them a whole lot here. They ended up getting Tevin Jones from the Saskatchewan Roughriders in free agency. Jones is a little bit older, but he did have a 850-plus yard season for the Riders last year. Going to be interesting to see how the Owls end up handling the loss of Austin Mack, as he is with the Atlanta Falcons in the NFL now. The NFL was not kind to the Owls this year, as Lawal Uguak ended up leaving as well to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So losing two parts of this Grey Cup winning side hurts. However, they were able to sign extensions for guys like Therese Beverett, Sean Lemon, and Darnell Sankey. I couldn't think of the name. But either way, you're looking at a deal where it's going to be a situation where the Owls, if they are slow out of the gate, you could probably talk about talent that they lost to the NFL, and then the fact that they focused more on retention than addition. I'm excited to see how this team does. I was one of those people that was relatively low on Montreal going into the season last year. This year, I'm not really sure where to put them. I think that the expectations should be a little bit higher than some other teams out east, but I think some other teams out east could outperform them just because of the fact that, again, they lost some of that talent. And I think in some of the categories, they're a little bit average, but I guess we'll see with the Owls because, again, they proved me wrong last year and won a title and, are in a spot where maybe they could go back and make another deep run. As for the Ottawa Red Blacks, kind of an interesting situation where a lot of their additions were made via trade or just picking up players that were already on the market. I think the biggest thing that we're talking about here was the fact that they traded to get quarterback Drew Brown from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for a 5th round pick off the top of my head. Not too bad. They basically were able to negotiate a deal a little bit earlier because they got him via the trade. Kind of excited to see how he does as a free agent. We've talked about before with Brown, he has this potential maybe, but of course he's been on pretty good Winnipeg teams and been kind of sheltered, I guess, compared to some other markets he could be thrown into. Going to be in a situation where it's him and Jeremiah Masoli competing for the job. I'd imagine Brown will be the starter because of what they put into him. And at this point, Masoli is a little bit older. But at the same time, too, I think if Brown falters a little bit or if Masoli is able to come on in and do relatively well, I don't think it's that crazy to say that Masoli could be the starter, at least in some stretch for the season. But I think right now you have two quarterbacks in the team or on the team that very well could help them get to a playoff spot, because if one goes down, maybe the other one's right there to be able to pick up the pace or the load compared to some other teams. And I'm excited to see if Drew Brown can be that starter for them. But again, seeing what he's got in Winnipeg compared to Ottawa, a little bit different, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. They were able to get Rhymes, who was released by the Lions due to salary cap issues. Rhymes played with the Red Blacks before and is a guy that, when he's healthy, is capable of being a game changer. The receiving core with him and Hardy and Eklund, like I've said, is certainly not bad. And now you're hoping this Ottawa side can transform back into that Grey Cup contender team that they were back in the day, 2015 through 2018. Since then, things have not been good. But I would say, like I've been saying, unfortunately, the past few off seasons, especially last off season, there's more reason to be optimistic than in recent years, and surely they'll be better than what they were last year. Fingers crossed, though, right? As for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, a side that went 6-12 over the past 2 seasons, they have a new coach in Corey Mace. It came over from Toronto, previously the defensive coordinator there, and he's going to be tasked with getting this team back in playoff contention, which I think with what they're able to do in free agency, maybe they're going to be there. They ended up getting A.J. Ouellette from the Toronto Argonauts, and that is a deal where Ouellette is a little bit older. And last year, I thought I remembered its season being better, but it was still a good year for him. And this is a Riders side that actually averaged the fewest yards per carry in the entire league. I was hopeful going into the year that things would be better for them. Obviously, some things with the O-line were impacted, quarterback situation impacted. I thought that Hickson and Morrow would be able to make a bigger impact. But still, seeing Ouellette here is going to be very fun to see whether or not this free agency addition is going to be able to help this side out, as he is a power back, but at the same time too, he's got that speed where if he gets to the outside, he can go through. But yeah, he is going to be a player that I feel like the Lions, I'm not going to be too excited to watch him play against us if they're winning, but he's a fun guy. And on top of that too, they end up getting Jamarcus Hardrick from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in free agency. Yoshi ended up basically saying, hey, you know, I feel bad for leaving Winnipeg because I'm leaving a side that I've played for and won multiple Grey Cups with, but at the same time too, I'm a little bit older and I ended up getting a lot of money to join the Riders. It's going to be fun to see if he can help out this offensive line and make this just a better team offensively. There are some defensive pieces they added as well, but I think we're going to be more focused on how this offensive side does this year for the Riders, as you have Harris that should be healthy, led in the backfield, and then they did lose some pieces. Tevin Jones left, but in general they were able to resign guys like Sean Bain Jr. and, like I said, had some more of those flashy names brought in through free agency. I do feel like this team should be better than 6-12. I don't see them going 6-12 or worse. I think that it's going to be weird to see if they do make the playoffs, if they don't make the playoffs, because how good is Edmonton going to be this year? You know, is Calgary going to be that 6-12 team that we saw last year? I would say that at the moment, I feel like with what they've got, I would trust them more than maybe Calgary or Edmonton to make the playoffs. But again, too, if they go 6-12 or worse and everybody's still relatively healthy, that's when I'd start to say, you know, some pieces in the front office are going to be leaving. And I think we're all aware of who they would be, but I'm kind of curious to see how the Riders do early on this year. And I am hoping that they can be competitive because the league is better when the Riders are good. As for the Toronto Argonauts, there is a lot to talk about with Toronto that I don't really want to get into at the moment because, again, with everything going on with Chad Kelly, we don't really know what's happening, but Toronto could very well have a very bad season because Kelly could not be playing for them because of all that. So we're just going to kind of focus more on the free agency side versus that side right now. And I still think, unfortunately, it's more bad news for the Argos. They lost a lot of pieces, like I said. Javon Leake left, and some other guys were just gone because they ended up going to get more money. And, you know, with how the cap is, guys are going to leave. But they were able to retain key pieces that they felt like were important. Obviously, Dejon Allen, and getting a guy like Sean Hoekman to stick around, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think one of the things I'm more excited to see this year is Kadeem Carey and how he does in the backfield. They lost Ouellette to the Riders, but I think that with what they're getting in Carey, that could be a very good deal, bargain deal, if you will. They signed him to a 1-year, $125,000 contract, and right off the bat, I know people say, can he be healthy and can he perform, I guess. But from what I read, the PFF, Pro Football Focus, had the O-line for Calgary to be the worst in the league last year, and with an injured Carey, that could probably explain why you would expect more of a rebound from him. And again, looking at this, a 1-year deal that's relatively cheap, I could definitely see Carey being one of those pieces that helps out this offense. I am a little bit worried, again, too, what's going to happen with Kelly and some of the departures. This Argos side will not be 16-2 this year, I can guarantee you that. And Coach Dinwiddie is going to have his hands full, if you will, trying to keep this team being a division contender. As through 2021, 2022, and 2023, they have run the East. We'll see if that happens again this year. And Argos fans, I don't want to say that it's going to be a year without playoffs, but this is going to be a year that I think could very well test your patience. And finally, we have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Not a whole lot to talk about here in terms of free agency, as a lot of their signings were made beforehand because we know that's what they like to do. They like to keep their guys. They like to, you know, find maybe diamonds in the rough, if you will. But big thing was keeping Brady Oliveira and Dalton Schoen. And then in free agency, you know, a name that sticks out again because there's not a whole lot that they were able to just go out there and get flashy with it because they've got money going towards players. They were able to re-sign Sergio Castillo the other day. That was maybe yesterday or 2 days ago. So just having somebody that they could expect to be fairly reliable as a kicker this year, not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, that's Winnipeg for you. And I did want to add real quick that the Argos did sign Rashid Bailey the other day. So that is going to be a loss for Winnipeg and a gain potentially for Toronto. But anyway, what are your thoughts on CFL free agency? Who was the team that benefited the most from the free agency period, or just in general this offseason? Who do you feel like lost the most as a team? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe and have a great night.